When you see an orchid like this, a Dendrobium nobile, your first thought is probably to baby it, right? But what if I told you that's the worst thing you could do? To get this incredible explosion of flowers, you actually have to be, well, a little cruel. It's this idea of strategic neglect that goes against everything we think we know about gardening. And that's really the heart of it all. It just doesn't make sense at first glance, does it? More water, more warmth, more food, that should equal more flowers. But for this specific orchid, all that love is actually sabotage. So the big question is, how on earth does being mean to this plant create something so breathtakingly beautiful? So yeah, that's the mystery we're going to unravel today. Why do you have to practically freeze and starve this thing to get it to bloom? Why isn't a period of cold and drought just a good idea, but completely 100% essential? The answer, it turns out, is a pretty incredible story about evolution and survival. All right, so to figure this out, we have to go back to the source. And I mean that literally. We're going to the orchid's home, the foothills of the Himalayas. See, the secret to this plant isn't hiding in some gardening book. Nope, it's written right into the mountains and the seasons where it first evolved. And just look at the world this plant grew up in. The seasons there are a tale of two extremes. You've got the monsoon summer, which is basically a tropical party, constant rain, super high humidity, perfect for growing like crazy. But then winter hits, and it's the total opposite. We're talking bone-dry air and temperatures that plummet down near freezing. This isn't like a gentle shift from summer to fall. This is a violent swing from an all-you-can-eat buffet to a famine. So how does a plant survive that? Well, it came up with a brilliant strategy. You see those thick, stocky parts of the orchid? Those are called canes or pseudobulbs. And the best way to think of them is like canteens. All summer long, during that monsoon party, the orchid is just frantically packing these canteens full of water and nutrients. It's basically prepping for that long, harsh winter when it knows the taps are going to be turned completely off. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. All that stress from the cold and the dry air, it's not just something the plant has to put up with. It's actually a message, a signal. It literally flips a switch deep inside the plant's biology, in its hormones, and forces it to make a choice. And this right here is the absolute key. The orchid is basically reading the room. It interprets the winter it's given. So if you give it a kind winter at home, keep it warm, keep watering it, the signal it gets is, hey, life is good, resources are everywhere. And its response, it just makes little copies of itself, these baby plants called keikis. But if you give it that harsh, authentic Himalayan winter, the signal is totally different. It's more like, uh-oh, my survival is threatened. I need to make sure the next generation survives. And that is the trigger for flowers. There's actually a cool scientific name for this whole process. It's called vernalization. And it's not like the plant just prefers to be cold. It's a non-negotiable biological requirement. That extended cold period literally changes the plant's internal chemistry. It rejiggers its hormones and tells all that energy it stored up in its canteens, okay, forget making more leaves, it's time to make flowers. And it's gotta be just right. This isn't a vague, just make it a little cool kind of thing. For that hormonal switch to flip, the orchid needs a solid 4 to 6 weeks, minimum, in a very specific temperature window. We're talking between 5 and 13 degrees Celsius, or for those of us in the US, that's about 40 to 55 Fahrenheit. If it doesn't get that long, sustained chill, that switch it won't flip, period. All right, so we get the why now, right? The science behind the stress. So let's talk about the how. How do you actually do this? This is what we call the winter rest protocol. And trust me, it's as much a test of your willpower as a gardener as it is a process for the plant. The steps are super clear, but you have to follow them to the letter. First, late autumn, once the new growth has finished, you cut off all fertilizer. Done. Step 2, you need to find it a new home for the winter, someplace with bright light but cold nights. An unheated porch or a chilly windowsill is perfect. And then here comes the really hard part. You stop watering. I mean completely. Put the watering can away. You won't touch it again until you see those flower buds start to form. And this is the moment that will test your nerve. Because after a while, you're going to see those nice, plump green canes they'll start to wrinkle up and look a little shriveled. And every single bone in your body is going to be screaming at you, water it, water it. You have to fight that instinct. I promise you that dehydration isn't a sign that it's dying. It's a survival tool that the orchid is using on purpose. So why is this wrinkling actually a good thing? 2 reasons. First, as the cane loses water, the sugars inside its sap get super concentrated. And guess what? Sugary water freezes at a lower temperature. It's basically making its own natural antifreeze to protect its cells from the cold. And second, and this is just as important, the plant is dormant. Its metabolism has basically shut down, so its roots can't even take up water. If you water it now, the roots will just sit in cold, wet soil, which is a one-way ticket to deadly root rot. So remember this, a dry dendrobium in winter is a safe dendrobium.
Okay, so you've done it. You've resisted the urge. You've been cruel for months. After that whole test of your will comes the reward. As you get into late winter, you start checking the plant every day, looking for the very first signs that all your hard work and your strategic neglect is about to pay off. Big time.
And then one day, you see them. These tiny little bumps starting to push out from the sides of the canes. That's it. That's the moment of victory. You've done it. You've triggered the bloom cycle. But, and this is huge, hold on. Do not water yet. This is the final and maybe most critical test of your patience. Why? Because this is so important. If you give it water right at this super delicate stage, the plant can get confused. It's like it gets a mixed signal, and those promising flower buds can actually switch tracks and turn back into those little baby plants, the keikis. You'll have done all that work for nothing. So you have to wait. Wait until those little bumps develop enough that you can actually see the distinct shape of the tiny individual flowers. Then you can water. And when those flowers finally open, wow, it's just a spectacular sight. But you know, when you step back and look at the whole journey, there's more to it than just pretty flowers. This whole process teaches a pretty deep lesson, doesn't it? It's about patience, about struggle, and about seeing that sometimes hardship has a hidden purpose. Yeah, there's this line from the source material that just nails it. We live in a world that's always pushing for more, constant growth, constant productivity. But this orchid is a powerful reminder that those quiet periods, those times of dormancy, they're not failure. That harsh winter rest wasn't the end of the story. It was the silent, absolutely essential preparation for something incredible. So I'll just leave you with this idea to chew on. The spectacular beauty of this orchid, it wasn't created in the easy times of spring. It was earned in the cold and the quiet of winter. It really makes you wonder, right? What if that's true in other parts of our lives too? What if those periods of struggle and rest, what if they aren't setbacks, but the necessary price we have to pay for our own spectacular growth?